Al-Etejah News Channel. The truth fears no questions.
Welcome to the Middle East Stream. I'm Mhamad. Terror and death is haunting Beirut's southern suburbs. The Abdullah Azzam brigades claimed responsibility for a twin suicide car bomb attack which killed 6 people and wounded 129 others near an Iranian cultural center in a southern suburb of the Lebanese capital Beirut on Wednesday morning. The terrorist group said they were targeting the Iranian cultural chancellery and demanded an end to Hezbollah's involvement in the war on Syria, as well as the release of all its members from Lebanese prisons. Now, to further elaborate the Lebanese political scene amid ongoing terrorist attacks, with us tonight in the studio is Dr. Labaki, political analyst and professor of international law. Welcome with us, Dr. Labaki.
Thank you.
And also with us via link is Mr. Mhamad, Kleit, journalist and political analyst. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Kleit.
Good evening.
Now let us start by watching this following report.
A twin suicide bomb hit the surroundings of the southern suburbs of Beirut during the morning rush hour on Wednesday, killing at least 5 people and wounding more than 100 in an attack targeting Iran's cultural center. The blasts were caused by 2 suicide bombers of the Abdullah Azzam brigades, an Al-Qaeda-linked group that claimed responsibility for Wednesday's attacks via Twitter. A wave of bombings linked to the war in neighboring Syria has struck Lebanon during the past few months, killing and wounding scores of people. Iran is a major backer of Hezbollah, and both Iran and Hezbollah are allies with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. However, even before Hezbollah was engaged in military activity inside Syria, foreign-backed insurgents operating in Syria had vowed to strike against Hezbollah in Lebanon in retaliation for its full support to the Syrian government. For its part, the Lebanese security forces last week arrested a man identified as the Al-Qaeda-linked mastermind of the recent string of car bomb attacks. The arrest of Naim Abbas was followed by a security sweep that resulted in the seizure of a number of cars rigged with explosives and ready to be deployed. 3 years of turmoil in Syria have had its toll over into Lebanon, exacerbating sectarian tensions and triggering violence, including frequent clashes between armed groups in the northern city of Tripoli. The war has also affected the Lebanese politics, leading to the paralysis in government for more than 10 months. However, Prime Minister Tamam Salam on Saturday finally managed to form a government, grouping rival parties in an effort to prepare for the upcoming polls and help the government deal with security, humanitarian, and economic challenges.
Dr. Labaki, in response to yesterday's bombing plan, which was supposed to be similar to that of November 19, 2013, twin attack on the Iranian embassy in Beirut, we have the Interior Minister, Mhamad of the Lebanese cabinet, attributed the explosions to the Lebanese political movement's involvement in the fighting in Syria, which according to him has given terrorist groups a reason to carry out blasts on Lebanese soil now. How accurate do you think this accusation is, and what can the cabinet actually do in order to protect civilians from such attacks?
Well, with due respect to the new Minister of Interior, this is not accurate at all. We have a lot of evidence that 14 March people were involved in Syria previously to Hezbollah involvement. We have the ships that were seized. We have a lot of smuggling of arms. We have seen on TV stations tens of killed fighters who were fighting the Syrian regime within Syria. So I think, honestly, this is highly documented. This is at least the known part of the iceberg. There is a hidden part that is much more dangerous, in my opinion. So it's not true. In fact, Hezbollah was forced finally to enter the Syrian conflict. I am sure Hezbollah was not willing to do so. Nobody is willing to enter in a conflict for whatever reason, especially Hezbollah, which has a lot of wisdom, leadership. So this is not really accurate, to be really honest, and we can document that as I have mentioned it.
But what can the cabinet actually do to protect the civilians right now?
Look, we have to be very honest. This country has porous borders. People come in and out without control. Within the Lebanese territory, I will say it, where we don't know how many people are there. We have at least more than 1 million Syrian refugees. Of course, most of them are civilians, they are escaping conflict. But it takes to have 400 or 500 or a couple thousand to mess up and to provoke such humanitarian disasters and violence. We have also areas that escape government control, some Palestinian camps. And we have also areas that escape control because of political support. We have seen often terrorists released under political pressure. We have seen areas closed to security forces, the legal forces, for political reasons. With such situation, you wonder really why things are happening. On the other hand, if that government is really serious, it has really to take a different stand by condemning clearly these violent movements, these terrorist attacks, naming them as terrorist attacks, and also by giving a totally free hand, a real one, not just for the apparatus and publicly, but deep down they do the contrary, giving the Lebanese security forces really a free hand to tackle these terrorist movements. Otherwise, I am afraid things will continue.
Well, let us go and ask Mr. Kleit about what he thinks of all of this. Mr. Mhamad Kleit, Interior Minister Mhamad Mashnouk did suggest that what he called the death borders in the eastern Bekaa region need to be closed. And he added that the army and the security forces need to carry out their role in the protection of the nationals. Now, can that be a first step into giving cover to the Lebanese army to conduct a military offensive maybe in certain Lebanese borderline villages that might host terrorist groups that might be responsible of these ongoing attacks?
Well, for starters, I sure hope that the military forces and security forces of Lebanon do take that step in order to defend the Lebanese borders and the Lebanese cities against the terrorist attacks and terrorist existence in some of these villages, especially villages like Arsal and certain areas in northern Lebanon. But what we do need actually is not a political cover for security and military forces. We do need military and security forces do need the political powers to release those villages and those groups, and even some municipalities release them from the political cover that they have, because as we've seen over the time, ever since the Syrian crisis started to expand towards Lebanese villages, we have seen that there are some people in certain powers, especially in bordering towns, that have been cooperating with these terrorist groups. All of that under political cover of certain politicians, whether in the Lebanese parliament or in the Lebanese governmental cabinet.
If you are there mentioning or trying to mention that Ali Al-Hujayri, the head of the, I think the Ministry of,
the municipality
of Arsal. Well, he was on TV last week, actually, after the army.
He denied that there are any terrorist groups.
Not only that, he also said that they have more than 10 military checkpoints inside Arsal. So how can that be so hard for the military to catch the terrorists?
The military checkpoints are on the interior borders of Arsal. They're not on the Syrian and Lebanese borders. They're between Arsal and other Lebanese towns such as Hermel and other ones. And actually, when I saw the interview or the intervention of Ali Hujayri on TV, I actually laughed when he said that there are no terrorist groups inside Lebanon, or especially inside Arsal, while as Al-Nusra Front and Abdullah Azzam and also the brigades of Marwan Hadid, they have claimed and they actually assured via videos, via tweets and photos and many other ways that they are firing rockets from Arsal, not the town, actually the countryside of Arsal, towards Hermel, towards Britel, towards Nabishir, and even towards Syrian towns such as Yabrud or any town that has political groups that are pro the Syrian regime, whether military or
we also do have today actually statistical figures that say that 60% of the population of Arsal are foreign-backed forces and not Lebanese citizens of Arsal. So Dr. Labaki, what do you think the army should do about that?
Well, we know that there are tens of thousands of civilians. So it's on one side, this is a very important difficulty. But I think security forces has to spread that control all over the territory, whatever it takes. Otherwise, really, you have loopholes from where these cars will always appear and hit. You know, if you take Europe, if you take civilized countries, armed forces, legal police control the territory. Whenever you have an area escaping the control of the state, you have all these violence, this terrorism, smuggling, trafficking, all sort of traffic.
Well, Dr. Labaki, taking the political side of this, the explosion came a few days after Prime Minister Tamam Salam formed a new cabinet to end the almost 11 months of paralysis in Lebanon. He described Wednesday's attack as a message by forces of terrorism to continue in their plan to spread death in Lebanon. Now, who was actually sending this message? I mean, obviously, there are powerful states behind these terrorist groups that are ordering them to continue their attacks. So where is the message coming from?
Well, you know, we are in the midst of a big fight in the Middle East. The conflict is continuing, is protracted. Unfortunately, Geneva II was a failure. So we have to wait Geneva 3, 4, 5, and 6, and so forth. So, as they say in French, tous les coups sont permis during the war. So you can do all attacks are allowed in a war framework. So, and I think the Syrian conflict is spilling over to a number of Middle Eastern countries, including starting from Lebanon, Jordan, and in the future we'll see that spill over.
It also reached Ukraine at the moment.
Reaching other countries. So I think we are in the midst of this big fight between two projects in the Middle East. One based on resistance, the other one calling for Western hegemony. So I think we have to admit that.
Well, Mr. Kleit, when we see the rival political parties in Lebanon disagreeing on a fundamental principle for, as if like Hezbollah, meaning fighting in Syria to protect its resistance, basic armor would, just as Dr. Labaki was just saying, how possible is it for these rival groups to actually agree on activating the government's institutions in order to effectively serve the Lebanese public?
Well, I think in that case that the Lebanese government, the new Lebanese government, should focus more on the security of Lebanon, basically by trying to placing the iron hand on the Lebanese border in order to stop, not to stop the refugees from coming into Lebanon, although that should be a step that should have been taken a while ago, because most of these terrorist groups and fanatics are entering with refugees in an illegal way. Not all the refugees that are in Lebanon are entering in a legal way. Not all of them have their papers. At the same time, most of them are sitting, as Dr. Labaki has mentioned, are sitting in refugee camps. As we have seen that most of these terrorists, after they have been identified who they are and who has sent them, most of them, if not all of them, they were coming from Ain al-Hilwa refugee camp in Saida, and all of them were followers of Ahmad al-Asir.
So they are the residue of the battle in Saida, you mean?
Exactly. Ahmad al-Asir is mostly the one that's is the HR manager of these terrorist groups, if we could say. And but most of the logistics are coming from Syria, whether the cars or the explosives and so on.
Well, Dr. Labaki, we have no salvation is expected actually inside the Lebanese political scene except through unwavering solidarity among all rival parties. Now, how likely is it for this solidarity to actually occur?
Well, we know that everyone is still hanging on its position. But this government was a result of, I think, the US-Iranian detente as a sign of good gesture if we want to talk regionally and internationally. On the local level, a number of agreements were cut, some known, some unknown. Some of them were just politically biased. Others were more honest because there was also a will to put an end to that one-year stalemate. But there was a very important need finally to conclude or to come up with an ending to that conflict. Usually in such conflicts, when there are a lot of internal divisions, it has been tried in international law. You bring the strong parties, you put them around one table, and you try to draw a certain map road for them. Somehow this is what happened in a way, but I think it was an incomplete map road. And before coming, I was hearing some of these ministers opposing the trio that of the resistance,
the army, the people, and the resistance. Well, let us talk about this after the break. Dr. Labaki, we have to take our first break for tonight. Please stay tuned. We will be right back.
Pollution and climate change, medicine manipulation, genetically modified food, the destruction of wildlife, and corporate exploitation. These are all part of a new terrorism threatening our future.
Eco-terrorism, global awakening to a world under threat. Evening. Women's rights redefined.
We are back with Middle East Stream with Dr. George Labaki, political analyst, and Mr. Mhamad, Kleit, journalist and political analyst. Now, a week ago, Lebanon was without a government and facing the prospect of an even deeper crisis come May, when President Michel Sleiman's term was set to expire with no agreement on his replacement. But in a matter of days, a degree of hope was restored and the cabinet was formed, leaving the public stunned with what was it that suddenly changed in the political scene that brought about this new cabinet after nearly a year without one. More details on the following report.
Deemed a cabinet of national interest, the new Lebanese government formed under the leadership of Prime Minister Tamam Salam was forged during a period of heightened tensions in Lebanon, triggered by political divisions over the country's stance towards the war on neighboring Syria and a national debate over whether the state should legitimize Hezbollah's weapons. The new government brings with it hopes for restoring stability, reinstating the country's stalled national dialogue, passing a new electoral law, and preparing for presidential elections within its constitutional mandate for 3 months. However, these high expectations are bound by simmering political tensions that could derail progress. Tensions stemming from the ongoing Syrian crisis and the brutal debate of whether Hezbollah should continue its military participation or not could lead to the government's failure. Now, with the new cabinet arrangement, competing March 8 and March 14 representatives will now have to confront each other within the confines of a single government. Until now, their conflicts have played out primarily on the street. Being forced to work together in the cabinet could help reduce tensions. However, there is a simmering conflict over the cabinet's yet-to-be-developed ministerial delegation. The March 14 coalition insists on including the declaration in the statement and removing the tripartite formula of the army, the people, and the resistance. Hezbollah and its allies, on the other hand, maintain that enshrining the resistance in the government's statement is necessary for the protection of Lebanon. So while the new Lebanese cabinet is seen as a step in the right direction, its success and its longevity is now to be on hold until the ministerial statement draft is approved by all parties, an approval that is far from being assured.
Dr. Labaki, hopes are high that Lebanon's new cabinet can restore stability in the region or in the country, but a simmering tension stemming from a complete refusal for Hezbollah's role in the Syrian conflict is threatening to derail progress in this new cabinet. And what are your prospects for the upcoming ministerial statement drafting?
Well, you know, first of all, it's good to have a government after 1 year. There are a lot of pending issues that cannot really wait further. Now, again, I would be more practical. We'll see what are the policies concerning a number of very specific issues. The Syrian refugees spill over Lebanon, the issue of terrorism, the will really to isolate terrorist environment, the real will to give the army and the police free hand to fight terrorism all over the Lebanese territory. I think these are some indicators. Now, concerning the trio we have mentioned, it has been said that the Arabic language rhetoric can find really an acceptable way to put it. Mm-hmm. But again, it's not an issue of rhetoric. I think what we want really is real solutions concerning the issues I have mentioned. Mm-hmm. And thus, very quickly, we'll test really if there is a real will to act on the issues I have mentioned.
But Dr. Labaki, some of the ministers in our government, in the cabinet right now, and others who are outside of the cabinet are saying that the solution would be for Hezbollah to stop its intervention in Syria, because it is why the terrorists are actually targeting certain Lebanese areas.
Well, frankly, then we go back to square one. I think everyone was interested in entering that government that might last much more than 1 month. I think there was a fear that the previous government would have taken over in case of vacancy of the presidency. Mm-hmm. So everyone wanted to compromise to be there because things could last much more than 1 week. And of course, we are supposed to have parliamentary elections. So this is why everyone wanted to be present in the Council of Ministers. Mm-hmm. But if this is the starting point, and I think it's not a very good start.
Well, Mr. Kleit, the new cabinet arrangement means that competing March 14 and March 8 representative will have to confront each other within the confines of a single government. But until now, their conflicts have played out, primarily on the street. Now, by being forced to sit together in this cabinet, would this actually help in reducing the tensions in the country, or will it do the other way around?
Well, of course it will, because at the same time we see that the people, by each government, they're growing wiser and wiser, and it's actually a growing stereotype in the Arab world that Lebanon, the Lebanese citizens are the ones that least have confidence in their politicians, and it's actually true if you come to reality. And we see that by this growth of malconfidence in the Lebanese politicians, I wouldn't see that the people's view towards this government would change at all. But seeing that the contradictions that are in this government are even worse than the ones in the governments before, since 2005. I think people will grow more and more, they won't have any confidence in this political group at all, so that they would see that their welfare would be a priority over the governmental welfare. And I hope that politicians see that as well, that the citizens' welfare is much more important than the welfare of their pockets or even their chairs.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Labaki, we have two main actually competing propositions on the table. Let me start with you with the first one. There's the first proposal by the March 14 camp. It is centered on the Babda Declaration. And this document approved in 2012 by representatives of both March 8 and March 14 alliances. It dissociates Lebanon from surrounding regional conflicts, especially the Syrian conflict, to consolidate internal stability and avoid sectarian clashes inside Lebanon. Now, what do you think will happen to the Babda Declaration?
Again, if we go to square one, I think we are in a stalemate again. It's good, this is a divided country. So you have to get everyone on board. I think this is why I can understand why that government was formed. But on the other hand, there should be a minimum agreement.